Hey, this is Chris. Now, with so many ETFs to choose from in Australia, one of the big questions you probably have is whether you should buy the hedged ETFs or the unhedged ETFs. It's something that comes up quite often for us. We have people asking, what do I do? Do I need to hedge or do I not need to hedge? So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what hedging is and then why you might want to hedge your ETFs or why you might not want to hedge your ETFs. So first of all, hedging is about whether you have exposure to other countries' currencies when you own ETFs or only the Australian dollar. And it actually can have a really big impact on your returns. So let's look at a quick example here. If you own a global US shares ETF and it's unhedged, and the ETF or the prices of the US shares go up by 10%, but the Australian dollar compared to the US dollar goes up by 10%, what it means is you make 10% on the share prices, but you actually lose the 10% on the Australian dollar and they cancel each other out. And so what you can make in the shares, if you're unhedged, you can lose in the currency, or you can actually make extra in the currency if the Australian dollar falls. So you're basically exposed to two things when you're unhedged. It's both the share price movements as well as the currency movements. And this can be a good or bad thing. On the other hand, if you have hedged ETFs, what it means is that you've basically cancelled out the currency exposure. So all you really care about is whether the shares themselves are going up or down. So in the example of US shares, all you really care about is whether the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ is actually going up or down, and you don't really care whether the Aussie dollar versus the US dollar is moving in one direction or another. Now, actually, I don't think there's a simple answer as to whether you should or shouldn't hedge your currency when it comes to ETFs, but I want to give a few examples of where you may or may not. So for instance, with global shares, my preference is always to unhedge or not to hedge your ETFs. And the reason for this is actually part of diversification is actually diversifying outside of Aussie dollars. Just like you want to diversify outside of just owning the Australian share market, you want to actually own currencies in other countries. You want to own some sterling, some Japanese yen, some Swiss francs. And by being unhedged, you actually get the benefit of really good diversification into other currencies. So when it comes to shares, my preference generally is to be unhedged. Now this has done really well over the last 10 years because the Australian dollar has fallen. The downside is if the Australian dollar has a really good period and rises from 70 to 80 or 90 cents, you're not going to do quite as well if you own the unhedged ETFs because you'll lose a little bit on the currency side. The other place where I always would prefer to own unhedged ETFs is in gold. So gold we use in portfolios as a diversifier, and one of the things you want to diversify out of is the Australian dollar. You want to protect your money and the purchasing power of your money. And if the Australian dollar in the future gets devalued by a large amount, you don't want to lose all of that money. And so we don't hedge our gold exposure to basically protect against an Aussie dollar devaluation. There is one example though where you always really do want to hedge your exposure, and that's on fixed interest or bond ETFs. So if you're investing in global bonds, you're probably these days expecting a pretty low return of, let's say, 2 or 3%. And you really want to hone in on the actual return of those bonds. Now, if you're unhedged, what happens is you might earn the 2 or 3% in the bond return, but then if the Aussie dollar goes up by 10%, you'll lose more than the 2 or 3% in the Aussie dollar movements. And so actually not being hedged in fixed income makes it way too risky, and you end up just with a currency exposure rather than actually owning the bonds. And so always with fixed income, my recommendation would be to keep your ETFs hedged, but generally with shares or gold, it would be unhedged. And so really across your portfolio, you have a combination of hedged and unhedged ETFs. If you like videos like this or other reviews of ETFs, please subscribe to this channel or give this video a like. Thanks.